session 6. Right now, we're going to talk about values. So I've taken you through a journey already. You've discovered your dreams. You've found out your strengths. We talked about destiny stealers. Make sure you're aware of them. Right now, we're going to look at our values, and you're going to find out what your values are. So values, what are values? Values are principles or standards of behavior. They are one's judgment of what is important in life. And every single one of you has different values. Our values will be circled around godly values, but the values are things that you live out in every single area of your life. So at home, with your family, with your friends, at work, at school, wherever you are, you live out those values, and they are deeply rooted and not easy to be changed. There are different periods in your life where values actually were formed. And so right away from birth until you're 7 years old, so your first 7 years of life, it's called the imprint period, which means that your values, the values of your family are going to be imprinted in your life. In those first 7 years, you spend a lot of time with family, you spend a lot of time with siblings, parents. They'll be the closest people in your life. And so they're imprinting their values into your life. Then between the age of 8 and 13, it's called the modeling period. What is happening in the modeling period? That's the period where you start to model what you have seen. You start to model the values that have been imprinted. So if you've been growing up in a Christian home, most of you would have grown up with Christian values around it. They have been imprinted in you. Then in the modeling period, you started to model them. If you've grown up in a non-Christian home, there would have been some values imprinted in you, which when you became a Christian, you wanted to change and you didn't want to live under anymore. I work with children, so I see this in children's lives. I have children in school and children I work with that are dishonest. They always lie. And I look at their family background and I see that there is a pattern of that going through the family, because that value of dishonesty has been imprinted, and so they've picked it up and now they're modeling what they've seen through their home. Between 14 and around 21, it's called the socialization period. So that's the time where you make the values your own. That's the time where you reevaluate those values. Do I want to live by those values? Is that really that important to me? Where you might pick other values and the things that are really important to you up. That is also a time where a lot of people really get a heart revelation of Jesus. And so if you come from a Christian home and you got saved around that time, you would then throw out some values you don't like that are not based on Christian principles, and you pick up some godly values in that time. And so values develop over time, and they're depending on the outside influences, as we just talked about. And so those personal values you carry, they influence the way you behave. I want to tell you an example out of my life. One of my values is loyalty. So if you are my friend, you picked a really great card, because I'll be loyal. I'm loyal to my friends. I'm loyal to my work. I'm loyal in my home. It's one of my values, which means nothing shakes that loyalty. And just last year, I went through this really disappointing time job-wise. I thought my job place will be loyal to you. I work casually. So I thought my job would be loyal to you, but I realized there is no loyalty coming from them. So I was really disappointed. And what happened was, it really crushed something which is a value of mine, which is so important to me. And I had to struggle through this and actually forgive the people, because that value is not their value. For them, loyalty is not the most important thing. It's not what drives them and what drives their behavior. So there was a clash of two different value systems. And so I had to walk through that. Another thing I realized, one of my values is integrity. And for me, integrity means if I say something, I'm going to do it. My yes is my yes, my no is my no. If I'm going to tell you I'm going to give you a call next week, well, you can trust and know that I'm going to give you a call next week. If I'm going to say, oh yeah, let's catch up, I'm going to definitely make sure we're going to catch up. And we often say that in our circles, don't we? Oh yeah, I'm going to give you a call next week, and we never do. And I realized I ran into that a few times actually in the church. People were saying, yes, I'll call you next week and make sure everything is okay, and I never got that call. And for me, that was going against my value system, because for me, that is really important. When I say something, that I'm going to follow up. It doesn't mean the other person is wrong and I am right. It just means there are different values that are being played out, different things that have different importance in people's lives. And so sometimes we get into situations where we get hurt, where we get offended, not because of personality types, different personalities, but because there are different values in the play and in our lives. And so our values get crushed, and people don't have the same value, so we don't feel understood. So it's good to know, and it's helpful to know what your values are, what actually drives your behavior, what actually makes you do certain things. And that's what we want to look about in this session. Let's have a look at some values that are dominant values in our Western society. And I think there's two very dominant values that we have lived under and we've been surrounded by since we were children. One is personal pleasure. It's a big value in our society in the West. And the other one is personal prosperity. A lot of people are driven by these values in our society. So the value of personal pleasure says, what I want, that's what I do. What makes me happy, that's what I do. What seems to give me the most satisfaction, that's what I do. And so that value is quite selfish. And it's all about, this is what I want. It's all about personally feeling good. It's all about personally being satisfied. And so when you look around yourself and when you look into our society, it's a big thing people are driven by. That's the way they make choices. That's the way they live their life. That's the way they talk to people. It's all about that personal pleasure. I'm not saying every person is driven by this, but it's a big overall value we can see in our Western society. And the second one was personal prosperity. People want more and more and more. Money is a big thing in our society. They're wanting more, they're wanting the bigger place. Yes, I take another job so I can have a bigger place, so I can have more materialistic things. It's a big thing in our society. But it doesn't mean it's a godly thing. So it's probably not necessarily your value. It's probably not something that is of big importance to you or of the same importance to you than it is in our society. But we need to be aware of these values because we're surrounded by them every day. In your workplace, even in your homes, wherever we go, we are surrounded by these values of personal pleasure and personal prosperity. And sometimes it's easy to actually also fall into them. And they suddenly become really important, although it's not really what we want. So be aware of these values that are actually big values in our Western society and that are driving people. Values navigate us through life. They're like a moral compass, if you want to put it this way. And so it's important to know your values so in living out your dreams. Say, I have a real passion for business. And one of my values is honesty. Well, I would run my business in a complete different way than somebody that doesn't have honesty as their value. I would go the extra mile. I'd do extra things. I'd make sure I'm above reproach with my finances. So it's a different way you would run your business if honesty is one of your values. There wouldn't be any lying because it goes against your value of honesty. And so as we know and as we find out our values, we just realize why we do certain things a certain way, which is helpful as we pursue our calling and as we pursue everything God has for us. I want to read a story in the Bible with you, and it's a story, actually another example about values, and it's in the book of Acts, in Acts 15. So I'm just going to get my Bible. Acts 15, and it's the verses 36 to 40. This is the beginning of the second missionary journey. Okay, so Paul's come back and he is talking and having a conversation with Barnabas about the second missionary journey, so the second trip. This is what's happening. Then, verse 36. After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us now go back and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word of the Lord, and see how they are doing." Now Barnabas was determined to take with them John, called Mark. But Paul insisted that they should not take with them the one who had departed from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to do the work. Then the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another. And so Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and departed, being commended by the brethren to the grace of God. So what is happening here? A big conflict between Paul and Barnabas. And it's all around this guy called John Mark. John Mark had come with them on the first missionary journey, but he didn't go with them till the end. After a few cities, that he dropped out and he went back home. Paul wasn't happy with that. Barnabas wants to take him again, but Paul is determined to not take John Mark with him this time. What is happening here? What is the root of that conflict? The root of that conflict is actually a values crash, a different value system. So let's have a look at Paul's value. Paul's value system is very much based on task and commitment. So in Paul's value system, if you commit to him, if you go with him, you have to stick with him till the end. If you say yes, you need to stick with him till the end. You can't just drop out. So what happened in the first missionary journey when Mark dropped out and went back home? It went against Paul's value system. So Paul's value system is, no, Mark, you have said yes, so you need to come with me till we get back together. And so when John Mark dropped out and went back home, his value system, Paul's value system, was violated. That's why Paul, in this case, is saying, I'm not going to take him. He didn't follow my value system, so to say. He didn't do what I expected him to do. I'm not going to take him again. That's Paul's thinking, and that's where he's coming from. Now, let's have a look at Barnabas on the other side. Barnabas is actually called and known as the son of encouragement. He's an encourager. And Barnabas' value system is all about developing people. He's all about giving people second chances, encouraging people. He sees potential in people. He's all about walking with people and giving them second choices and walking the long mile with them. So in Barnabas' eyes, this is an opportunity. Barnabas sees opportunity to disciple John Mark, to see him grow, to see him strengthen in the Lord, to see him step out in new ways. So Barnabas comes from a value system of developing people, of working with people, of taking people the extra mile and walking with them hand by hand, even if they're struggling. And so Barnabas comes from a completely different value system than Paul. None of them, those values are wrong or right. They are things that are really important to them personally. But what is happening here, those values are clashing. Barnabas is saying, opportunity, chance, let's take John Mark, of course. Paul is saying, no way. He violated my value system. I'm not going to take him again. And they have this big clash, this big dispute over John Mark. What happens? They go separate ways. So Barnabas ends up taking John Mark, and John Mark is actually going really well on that journey with Barnabas. Paul then is taking Silas with him. And we read later on in Acts that they actually reconcile, that they actually talk about the issue again, and they reconcile, and actually Paul then sees the potential in John Mark, and John Mark ends up traveling with Paul again. But in this case, what is happening in that story is a big value clash, and none of them is willing to let go of what their values are. And so, interesting story, but sometimes when we get offended, it is because we are coming against a different value system. Sometimes when people don't understand us and they don't really get us, it is because we are coming against a different value system. And so we do need to know our values to be able to pursue our dreams in the right way. And it gives you a new and a deeper understanding the way why you actually behave a certain way, why you do certain things. When I really realized that loyalty is in my value system, and when I saw what happened with that workplace, you know what, it was painful, but it grew me. It grew me, it developed my character again. And so we're going to look in our next activity at our values. Again, they're deeply held beliefs. You don't let go of them easily. You live them out in every single area of your life. And they're really important in your life. So remember that you live out your values in every area of your life. As Christians, there is a lot of things we are striving for, don't we? We want to become more like Jesus. We want to be generous. We striving for loving people. We want to be loving like Jesus is. We want to be people of integrity. We want to be people of honesty. So there's a lot of things we as Christians strive to become like. Okay, but that doesn't mean it is necessarily in our values yet. Okay, so if it is your value, it comes naturally. You live it out without thinking. You don't like it when it gets violated. And you just really hold on to those values. But then on the other hand, there are these things that we strive for because we want to become like Jesus. And they are, I guess, values in a way as well. Christian values, Christian morals. And we strive for a lot of them. We strive for them. We're spending time with the Lord. We're just striving to become, I don't want to say a better person, but to become more like Jesus by spending time with him, by having him work on our character. But a lot of these things we're striving for, and that's good, we should. And we should become more like Jesus. So we should strive for these things, but it doesn't mean that they are actually a value of yours, okay? So I say in my life, I'm striving to be a generous person. I give my time. I want to be a giver. But I remember the time when I actually was hanging out with a mate of mine, and he was the most generous person I have met for a long, long time. He'd give, he'd pour out, and I realized, wow, this is his value. Nothing can violate that value. I'm striving for it and I want to be more generous, but for him, nothing could violate that. That was his first priority. And it was so natural. He wasn't even thinking about it, he was just doing it. Sometimes I do need to think. I'm like, okay, God, I want to be generous. Oh, that's why I'm doing this. So it just came naturally out of him, which there was a bit of a difference. But both is good. Okay, so as you look at your values, have that in mind. We're looking at things that come naturally. You live out of them all the time. It just flows out of you. Those beliefs, those things you hold on to. And we're not looking at the things we're striving to be. Okay? Because we are striving to be like Jesus. So there's a lot of things we're aiming to become more like. If you want to open your values page right now, you see a big list on the page of values. Again, I've written a little bit of a description above on the page what values are. So it says here they define what you care about and why you do what you do. They're different for every person. Although we all have Christian values, your values are different to mine. Your values are kind of like your brand. When you look at a business, usually there's a certain culture that is displayed through that business, and that culture is that the values they carry. Your values are part of you that you can forget they're there, a bit like your strengths. Your behavior demonstrates your values, and they're deeply rooted in you and don't change easily. So, I want you to get a texter ready or a marker ready. And don't think about every value you read on the page, okay? I just want you to read through it, and the ones that jump out to you, I want you to underline them. Because when we start thinking about them, a lot of these values that are written on the page are things we're striving for. But we're looking for the things that are actually rooted in us, that are actually our value system, not the things we're striving for. So, read through the list, and the things that jump out to you, I want you to circle them or underline them or mark them with a different color. And there's a lot of values written on that piece of paper, on the sheet. So then, as you have underlined those values, the next thing what I want you to do, you flip over to the next page and just write all the values you've underlined out. Just write them down. Again, you might have 20 there, you might have 30 there, you might have only 10 there. But the reality is, we are living out of a maximum of 7 values. I look at the missionary organization, Youth with a Mission. Youth with a Mission has 21 values. But when I look at every YWAM base in the world, they carry around 6 values that are part of their DNA as a YWAM base. They strive for the other values. They strive to become like that. One of the values in Youth with a Mission is hospitality. And I've traveled around a lot of bases, and I've been to a base, YWAM bases and YWAM centers where it's a value. I just feel treated like a queen when I am there. They look after me. Their hospitality is incredible. But then I've been to other YWAM bases where they strive for hospitality, but there were a lot of things that they could have done much better. And so they're striving for those values because they're values of the mission, but it's not necessarily in the value system of that YWAM base. So the different values that every different YWAM base carries gives every YWAM base a different flavor. So read through them, underline the ones jumping out, and then what I want you to do, I want you to write them on that empty sheet, on that empty white page. And then I want you to prayerfully look through them and see if you can group some of them together. Sometimes there might be 4 or 5 values that mean exactly the same to you. So you group them into one, so you have a maximum of 7. If you only have 5, that is fine. We don't need to have 7. If you only have 5, that is fine. So I want you to then group them together, and then I want you to think about a title. What would be the main thing of that value? What would be the main title of that value? So I want you to put a title to those ones you've grouped together. Maybe the title will be one of the 4 things you've written down. Maybe you're going to give it an overall different title, a new different word. That's up to you. So then I want you to take that title and flip to the next page and write that title in your value number 1. This is the title for my value number 1. And then I want you to think about a statement for yourself. So this is the title. How do you live out that value? What does it look like to you? And that would be your statement. What does it look like to you? How do you live out that value in everyday's life? So for me, one of my titles would be loyalty. My statement would be, I'm loyal in my friendships, I'm loyal in my workplace, I stick with people, I always reach out, even if people seems to withdraw, I just keep extending, I guess, with my loyalty, then my love and my care for people and for situations. So that would be my statement. So I want you to think about your titles, and then write down your statement, which talks about how you live it out in your everyday's life, how it looks like for you. Yeah, enjoy that activity, and I'm sure you're going to realize new things about what is really inside of you. So enjoy.